All right. Good morning, panelists. My name is Chad Buterbaugh, and I serve as the Deputy Director of the Maryland State Arts Council. Two quick notes before we get started. To ensure an equitable process, we will be using a script to guide today's panel meeting, so there will be a high level of formality in our presentation. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded. Panelists, thank you for being here and for your service to the arts communities of Maryland. To begin, here's a reference shot of the features for Google Meet. Please note the mute and video buttons, which are a microphone icon and a camera icon at the bottom of your screen. Panelists, to avoid any background noise, we ask that you remain on mute during the meeting, unless you're speaking. Additionally, we ask that all comments regarding applicants are vocalized. Please refrain from using the chat feature. Are there any questions about Google Meet? Okay, next we'll go through some introductions. I'll start by introducing MSAC team members and our roles during today's meeting. I've already introduced myself, and my role beyond this introduction is monitoring today's meeting. Kathy Teixeira, Grants Director, will be serving as panel facilitator and will be averaging the final scores. Ryan Patterson, Public Art Program Director, and Nora Howell, Public Art Project Manager, are the program staff participating in today's meeting. They've reviewed the applications that you'll be discussing and scoring today and will offer clarifications as needed. Kirk Amaral Snow, Grants Management Associate, will be our timekeeper and provide technical support. Panelists, please introduce yourselves by name and organization or art form and location that you're joining us from. Ryan will call out your name for your introduction, and please be sure to unmute yourself before speaking.
Thanks, Chad. Let's begin with Virginia Warwick.
Hi, I'm Virginia, and I'm based in Baltimore City. I'm an artist and art educator.
Great. And Gabriella.
Hi, I'm Gabriella. I am the assistant curator at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, and I'm calling in from St. Michael's over on the Eastern Shore.
Thank you. Acacia.
Good morning, Acacia Asbo here. I'm the Community Grants Director with South Baltimore Gateway Partnership, and I am a painter, and oil is my medium.
Thank you. Hadassah.
Good morning. I'm Hadassah St. Hubert. I'm a historian, preservationist, and board member of Diaspora Vibe Culture Arts Incubator, and I'm based in Montgomery County.
Thank you so much. And Amber.
I'm Amber Carell, Town Manager, Town of Preston, Eastern Shore, and on the Caroline County Arts Council.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Seconding that gratitude, thank you all panelists. Also note that in accordance with Maryland's Open Meetings Act, applicants may also be attending online. Applicants and any other guest may observe but may not otherwise participate in the process. If you are here to monitor or observe, you will be unable to access video and mic functions for the duration of the meeting. We'll now review MSAC's guiding documents to ground today's process. First is our Indigenous Land Acknowledgement Statement. We acknowledge the lands and waters now known as Maryland are the home of its first peoples. The Yakahanic Indian Tribe, Assateague Peoples Tribe, Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, Choptico Band of Indians, Lenape Tribe, Nanticoke Tribe, Natsu-Wawash Band of Indians, Piscataway Conoy Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, Pocomoke Indian Nation, Susquehannock Indians, Yakagani River Band of Shawnee, and tribes in the Chesapeake watershed who have seemingly vanished since the coming of colonialism. We acknowledge that this land is now home to other tribal peoples living here in diaspora. We acknowledge the forced removal of many from the lands and waterways that nurtured them as kin. We acknowledge the degradation that continues to be wrought on the land and waters in pursuit of resources. We acknowledge the right of the land and waterways to heal so that they can continue to provide food and medicine for all. We acknowledge that it is our collective obligation to pursue policies and practices that respect the land and waters so that our reciprocal relationship with them can be fully restored. Our equity and justice statement. The arts celebrate our state's diversity, connect our shared humanity, and transform individuals and communities. MSAC and its supporting collaborators are committed to advancing and modeling equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion in all aspects of our organizations and across communities of our state. MSAC and its grantees are committed to embracing equity and non-discrimination, regardless of race, religious creed, color, age, gender expression, sexual orientation, class, language, and/or ability. Our vision is to play an essential role ensuring every person has access to the transformative power of the arts, and our mission is to advance the arts in our state by providing leadership that champions creative expression, diverse programming, equitable access, lifelong learning, and the arts as a celebrated contributor to the quality of life for all the people of Maryland. In 2024, MSAC adopted a new strategic plan consisting of 5 main pillars: access, bolster access to arts experiences and resources; awareness, amplify the stories of Maryland's arts sector and the value of public support; connection, foster networks within and beyond the arts sector; equity, cultivate a thriving arts ecosystem centered in equity; and leadership, commit to a culture of care and innovation. In today's panel meeting, we will ask all participants to observe these creative meeting actions, to celebrate being in the space with other creative people, engage with everyone's presence as a gift, acknowledge that together we know a lot, enter the conversation with curiosity and inquiry, share your idea and trust that it will be heard, use I statements, focus your language on the task at hand, hold one another accountable with care, apply yes and, or I hear your idea and I'm going to add to it, and balance your speaking and listening. We ask also that meeting participants, panelists, remain mindful of equity as expressed through the impact of an application versus grant writing skill. All applications are meant to inspire authentic reflection and internal analysis for each applicant, with the knowledge that MSAC is to be seen and utilized as a collaborative partner in the process. One aspect of this partnership is to guide panelists to see beyond the polish of grant writing, which may be inequitably influenced by the privilege of resources, whether those are financial or educational, etc., and instead for you to focus upon the impact of the applicant. We ask also that panelists frame their responses as recommendations. For example, the idea minimal information is provided about the applicant's plan for community engagement would become, I would recommend that the applicant include a detailed plan for community engagement in the planning process. Your recommendations framed this way provide valuable feedback for applicants. Are there any questions about any of the expectations shared throughout the guiding documents? Okay. Then I'm going to hand it over to Kathy Teixeira to lead us through the next part of the introduction. Take it away, Kathy.
Thanks, Chad. The goal of today is to arrive at a final average score for 22 applications submitted from across the state. We will review 3 conservation grant applications that received an average initial score of 81.8% or higher, and 19 new artworks grant applications that received an average initial score of 84.4% or higher. Please note, this panel meeting is not the full panel review process. Comprehensive application reviews and initial scores have been submitted by the panelists prior to today's meeting. Today is an opportunity to add to or edit those reviews and submit final scores based on discussions held by the panelists. Based on your discussion and final scoring, MSAC will determine the awarding of final grants. A reminder to panelists that this is not a comparative process. Each application is to be evaluated individually based on the rubric provided. Any comparison content between applications should not influence your score. Please also make sure your comments align with your scoring. If you're selecting a lower score for a particular criteria, your notes should provide justification and/or feedback accordingly. Next on the screen, you'll see a breakdown of the time allotted for each application's review. This process mirrors the panel process of the National Endowment for the Arts. MSAC's commitment to equity in the panel process requires anonymity of specific panelist scores. The initial and final scores shared today are the averages from all panelist scores. We will start by sharing a slide of the grant application's initial average score. The lead reader will start off with up to 2 minutes to introduce the grant in connection to the rubric. Our timekeeper, Kirk, will alert us at the 2-minute mark. Then we will open it up for additional discussion with all panelists for 3 minutes. The discussion period is to be used for sharing additional information or recommendations in alignment with the rubric. If the lead reader was cut off in their opening remarks, they would be welcome to complete their thoughts in this discussion period. Kirk will again alert us at the 3-minute mark. Then I will ask program staff, Ryan and Nora, to contribute clarifications when needed based on their review of the application. Additionally, they will provide reminders to panelists to ensure that panel recommendations are in alignment with the rubric and MSAC's panel procedures. Then panelists will have time to submit their final scores and comments in Smart Simple, and the final average scores will be shared. Panelists, we ask that you wait to submit your final scores and comments until after the discussion period has concluded. We will be taking short breaks about every 90 minutes or as needed, and depending on how we're doing on timing today, we may shift some of those break times, but we'll be sure to check in with you panelists before we do so. There has been one conflict of interest that has been identified prior to today's meeting. If you have a conflict of interest that we do not already recognize, please just announce yourself at the beginning of that application review. Those with conflicts will not participate in the discussions and scoring. Before we move on to begin our reviews today, are there any questions regarding the panel meeting structure? All right, if no questions, we're going to start off with a practice round using a test application. So panelists, you should now be logged into your Smart Simple account on your panelist home screen. You'll see today's applications listed under the pending final review section, so please go ahead and click that. And if you click on PAM type at the header of the top of your screen, this will sort the list in the order we will review today. So the first application that appears should be -37961, which is the test application. Please go ahead and open this test application. And if this were a real application, you would see all of your initial scores and notes here. But since this is a test application, the scores and comment sections will appear blank. We're going to walk through what the process would look like if this were a real review, and you'll hear the script that will be used for all the reviews today. So panelists, please open application ID -37961 submitted by the Maryland State Arts Council. The average initial score is 0%. The lead panelists will now have 2 minutes to introduce the grant in connection to the rubric. And this is where the lead panelist would speak. Then I will open it up for additional discussion with all panelists for 3 minutes. After the discussion period, I will turn to Ryan and Nora. Do you have any additional information to share? And this is where they would add any additional information. Then I would say thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please take 1 minute now to enter your final scores and comments in Smart Simple, if desired, and you would have time to do your rescoring. So panelists, please actually submit test sample scores for this test application so we can make sure everything is working as it should. So please go through and select any score for each of the scoring fields. And for the comment section, you could put in any random text like test or ABC. And then once you're done completing all of that, make sure you click on complete at the bottom of the page. So we'll just take a moment to allow you to do so right now. And the average final score is 91.7%. So this is the way that each application review will occur. Do you have any questions about this process? All right, so we're going to get started here. Before we do, our reviews today are grouped into application types. So we will start off with review of the 3 conservation planning and project grants first. Then we'll proceed to the new artworks planning applications, and then we'll finish with the new artworks project applications. So panelists, please go back to your panelist home screen and then to your pending final review section. Again, if you click on the PAM type in the header, it's going to sort your list in the review order. And we will get started with our first application. Panelists, please open application ID 2025-35388, submitted by the Fiber Arts Center of the Eastern Shore. The average initial score is 83.33%. Lead reader, Acacia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Good morning. The Fiber Arts Center of the Eastern Shore is seeking funding for a conservation planning grant in order to implement a planning project to restore and interpret art installations at 15 locations within Caroline County. The proposed request would support the Byway Quilt Trail that includes a series of 6x6 quilt block symbols that are painted and located on public land and historical properties along the Underground Railroad, or also known as Harriet Tubman Byway. The interpretive materials associated with this current installation includes a web-based driving tour, but there is no consistent signage at the art installations that link the visitors to the symbolic significance. In my reading of this application, the applicant provided a clear description of the planning process that includes a project committee, a RFP process to hire a professional conservator, as well as the project administrator. The application articulates the importance of quilt art to the community and its historical relevance to the people who were enslaved. There's a strong description of the expenses and income that align with all aspects of the planning process. I would recommend this application include more detail to how they would advertise both RFPs and other recruitment strategies to communicate the 2 RFPs for the contract services.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Acacia in terms of the application being a really good application, very descriptive in terms of the planning process that they plan to do. I do recommend more information about the community engagement that was done beyond 2010 when the art project was initially established and what was done to kind of engage the neighbors nearby. I also did have some recommendations about providing some guidance for the staff who would be hired to manage this project as well, since they did mention that their staff capacity is kind of limited and they have limited time for project management. I also recommended that they include more information about how that project administrator would be funded in the budget, just to give a little bit more clarity there.
I do agree with Acacia and Hadassah that there is a pretty good description of the project itself. Something I noted that I would recommend is, since the project was last worked on in 2010, that they update the stakeholder information and really get a good understanding, or at least articulate a good understanding of who the current stakeholders are at each one of these sites.
Panelists, are there any other thoughts, questions, or recommendations? All right. If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No additional comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Melissa, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 84.33%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35179, submitted by the City of Tacoma Park. The average initial score is 81.8%. Lead reader, Amber, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
All right, good morning. We had the City of Tacoma Park in Montgomery County. They want to refurbish and relocation of public art sculptures from 8646 Flower Avenue to city-owned property at the corner of New Hampshire Avenue and Holton Lane in Tacoma Park. The funds for this project grant will support the City of Tacoma Park's conservation, refurbishment, and relocation of the azalea sculpture by Howard Conley, currently at the Flower Avenue, to another city-owned site in Tacoma Park in Montgomery County. They're requesting $21,200. The only thing I had mentioned or seen was the budget in the number 4 and number 5 needed more detail on both the budget and the other one. Schedule, I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
Something that I thought would enhance this application in terms of the schedule would be to include an unveiling event that would bring the community together at the end, as well as maybe rewriting or enhancing the plaque to reflect the changes that have been made to this artwork.
Another recommendation I had is if they could have provided a little bit more information about the selection of the new site and other sites that they may have examined in terms of like government property, just to see the kind of level of community engagement in the project and that process and selection.
Something that I thought was really strong about this application was that they were able to engage the original artist to do the conservation work and the move. And it does seem that they have a really good understanding and a good relationship with that person, which is pretty strong.
All right, panelists, are there any other thoughts, questions, or recommendations? If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No additional comments.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you can please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 80.4%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35953, submitted by the City of Rockville. The average initial score is 87.4%. Lead reader Gabriella will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The City of Rockville in Montgomery County is seeking funds through the Conservation Project Grant to support the conservation of 5 public artworks that are installed throughout the city. These artworks were done at various times by different artists and are made up of numerous materials, including metal sculpture, outdoor murals, and stone sculpture. They were done as far back as 1988. The content or theme of these artworks varies. There's not one overarching theme or concept. They include celebration of Black settlers of the Lincoln Park neighborhood, an entry point into Monument Park, a man and a child playing in Twin Brook Community Center, and an abstract sculpture, as well as a column depicting activities and sports. The city has put together a plan that breaks out the needed conservation efforts for each artwork separately. They have a clear understanding of the conditions of the artwork as they stand now and the required treatments to conserve them. In my review of the application, the suggestion I had was to get some more information about the current community and its values, and that would help the application and the team better understand how important these artworks are to the current community and how the community should be engaged throughout this process.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I would add that majority of the proposed conservation projects demonstrates a strong importance to the community, as well as how the materials that were used are specifically located within that area. I would recommend that the applicants provide more information about the artists being involved with the City of Rockville, as well as any additional site permissions that may be needed for the project.
I agree. I do want to note that a kind of good thing about this project for conservation work, they are using best practices and standards in accordance with American Institute for Conservation, AIC, which I thought kind of contributed to like the kind of knowledge and experience that they're bringing to this conservation work.
One suggestion I had was in terms of the budget. It was an excellent outline of the budget, but my suggestion is to list the specific materials for each budget line.
All right, panelists, are there any other thoughts or questions or recommendations? If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No additional comment.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been a minute. If you could please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 86.6%. All right, panelists, so we did have a scheduled break here. However, we're running ahead of schedule, so we wanted to check in with you here and see if you want to continue on and do 2 more applications, or if you want to take your break now. Do you have a preference of continuing or taking a break?
I don't mind continuing.
Okay.
I would be fine continuing.
I'm good.
Yeah, good to continue.
Okay, great. Then we will continue with reviewing 2 more before we take our break. So now we are going to be shifting gears and moving on to the new artworks applications. We're going to be starting with our planning grant applications. So just noting the shift in the rubric here. All right, please open application ID 2025-34145, submitted by Maryland Hall for the Creative Arts. The average initial score is 88%. And lead reader Hadassah will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
This new artworks application from Maryland Hall for the Creative Arts would support the planning process for a new public artwork located on the Maryland Hall front lawn in the Arts District of Annapolis. They define their stakeholders in the community as the local school board, city and county governments, neighbors who pass by, interact with their campus, broad community of art students, after-school program participants, and also art audience members who pass by and interact with the outdoor space on the way into and out of the building. Public input for the project will come in 2 forms, open town hall meeting and invited committee member meetings. They will incentivize and recognize participation in the meetings through raffles. The artist with the winning proposal will be paid and provided tools to create digital renderings of the project to be submitted in subsequent grant cycles for our Maryland State Arts Council for consideration. I did have recommendations to kind of solicit proposals by working with artists organizations. And also I wanted a little bit more information about how would they identify other committee members who would participate in the selection of the artists. In terms of the planning schedule, I recommend including a little bit more time for the artist application reviews, or at least including more information about whether there might be a short application and also the review criteria for the selection. Other than that, I thought the budget was reasonable, and I liked in particular that they compensate the artists and the 10 committee members as well.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
One note that I had about this application is that the applicant mentions that they will specifically solicit feedback from critical or often underrepresented groups, but it is unclear of how these groups are defined, as well as some of the direct recruitment strategies to get them engaged with the project.
Something that I thought that could be enhanced was the description of the community itself. While Hadassah really highlighted that they do know their stakeholders and the people that will be interacting the most, they defined their local community simply as broad and diverse. I would like, or I think that I would suggest that they put more information about that or understand more information about that. That way it would help them better serve the community that might not be direct stakeholders, that might not be currently engaged or plan to be engaged, but still are part of their community. I think their community engagement activities are really well described and thought out. I really liked the idea of the raffle to drive community engagement during these meetings.
All right, panelists, any other thoughts, questions, or recommendations?
In my notes, I recognize that the planning schedule aligned with question 1 very specifically.
Thank you, panelists. That's been 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No additional comments.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you can please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 90.67%. Next, please open application ID 2025-34213, submitted by the Beach to Bay Heritage Area. The average initial score is 84.33%. Lead reader, Virginia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Hi, the application from Beach Bay Heritage Area is seeking funding for a planning grant to implement a project in Pocomoke City. The applicant proposes to do a public mural. In reading of the application, the highlights were my appreciation of the clear and specific description of the community and stakeholders of the proposed mural project. The new artworks planning schedule is well thought out and realistic in terms of a timetable. Some of the questions I had for this applicant were about the artist selection process in terms of how the vote is casted for a favorite design and how the artist is selected for by vote specifically. I have questions about the budget in terms of the specifics of what the 1,500 supplies for community engagement entails. Based on the rubric, I would recommend the applicant to elaborate on the artist selection process in terms of how the vote is casted by the community. And for the budget section, be more specific in the notes section on what the community engagement entails. For example, in terms of administrative fees, it could be listed what administrator is paid per hour and how many hours of work will be required.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
Some strengths of the application that I read was that the applicant did a great job at explaining the origins of the project and explaining that there are limited resources regarding the history of the area. I would recommend additional details regarding how that specific location was selected, and if a contingency needs to be in place if permits are not available or permits cannot be acquired.
I'll just add, I did like that they already kind of had consultations and began discussions with the Pocomoke Indian Nation to help with the mural. They've already done 3 murals in Salisbury, Crisfield, Berlin. They seem to know the process really well. But like Virginia, I did want to know a little bit more about the artist selection process. And they did mention that they're going to reach out to other area mural artists, but a little bit more information would have made this a bit stronger.
All right, panelists, any other questions, thoughts, recommendations? Not Ryan Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No further comment.
No comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you can please wrap up your scoring.
Gabriella, we are not seeing a score in for you. Could you double check and make sure you have clicked the complete button for this application?
Yes, it logged me out.
Okay,
I'm getting back there. My apologies.
no worries.
It should be in now.
I see it. Thank you. And the average final score is 83.67%. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute break here now. That's now 10:55, so we'll come back here at 11:05. See you back at 11:05. All right, folks, the time is now 11:05. If you can start to make your way back. And I see Acacia, Virginia, Hadassah, and Gabriella and Amber. If you could just give me a quick hello, or there you are, Gabriella. And Amber, if you could give me a quick hello or turn your video on just for a second so I know you're back. And there you are. Awesome.
I'm so sorry. The internet is slow. My son is home from school and on his game.
Okay, no worries. All right, so we're all back and we will continue with our reviews. So please open application ID 2025-35255, submitted by the St. Michael's Community Center. The average initial score is 90.42%. Gabriella has stated a conflict of interest and will not be participating in the discussions and scoring. Lead reader Acacia will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The St. Michael's Community Center is seeking funding for a new artwork planning grant in order to plan the process to create and install a new public sculpture located in St. Michael's Museum, located in St. Michael's, Maryland. The proposed project aims to select an artist to design a sculpture that informs residents and visitors of the early St. Michael's history, such as highlighting the shipbuilding center and seafood processing business. Majority of the community engagement work has already successfully occurred. For example, a survey has been disseminated, approval of the project from the town commissioners, as well as the development of a steering committee. The proposed funding request would focus on community engagement with the steering committee in order to prepare and issue a RFP for artist selection. The application, I would recommend the application include more detail regarding how community feedback was acquired within previously conducted surveys, and community meetings will be included within the artist selection process, or how the community meetings will impact the final sculpture selection. Based on the rubric, I would also recommend the applicant to include further details of how the final selected design will be vetted by the community and steering committee.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
One thing I would recommend as far as the budget, I did agree with everything Acacia already has said, but I did recommend kind of including an honorarium for the steering committee.
I also had one comment on the budget. In my notes, I mentioned that my recommendation is that the organization administrative fee could be more specific and clear in terms of how many staff members are working on the project and how many hours they work and what hourly rate they will receive, which would dictate the requested grant amount on that specific budget line. That could be clarified a little more.
Our panelists, are there any other thoughts or questions or recommendations? All right, if not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
No comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you can please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 90.42%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35327, submitted by Shanye Huang. The average initial score is 95.33%. Lead reader Amber will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
All right, good morning. What we have here is a planning grant for Mr. Shane's planning process for a new public artwork located in Hillingdale, Silver Spring, Montgomery County, Maryland. His goal is to create a comprehensive plan for prominent, impactful sculpture public art installation at the entrance of the nonprofit organization We Achieve, located in Hillingdale, Montgomery County. This installation will not only amplify the organization's mission and visibility, but also provide a joyful sight for the general public to enjoy. I did note that there was a very good outline to the events and background history to the nonprofit business. There is community events, outreach events included in the planning schedule, and I was happy that the budget balanced. I did have some questions when they talked about community organizations and leadership would be involved. I was interested in which community organizations would be involved and which leaderships they would be reaching out to.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Amber, especially on the kind of community engagement. You know, it includes kind of hand-on art workshops and activities for the residents and staff and families and caregivers to kind of share words and symbols in their languages, which I believe just actively engages them in the process. The schedule for me and planning budget was pretty realistic, and also the artists threw in some in-kind support as well.
I agree with Amber and Acacia that the budget and the schedule seem to be well thought out and articulated. I thought it was really cool that the people of We Achieve will be included in the community engagement and the benefit from the artwork itself.
One of the goals stated within this application is that the installation will serve as a community hub that includes members of the broader public. I would recommend additional detail to how the broader public or those that do not visit the We Achieve Center will be engaged in the planning efforts.
Panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? All right, if not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
Yeah, I would just like to add, there's a lengthy description of the planning process and there's a lot of information in there, but pulling from that area, I noted the artist describes from April to June that they will design and distribute 800 flyers to the surrounding area in an attempt to draw in public and the community members in that area. So that's a little bit of the detail I think we were looking for in some of those comments.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Unless that's been 1 minute, if you can please wrap up your scores.
And the average final score is 96%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35358, submitted by Whitelock Community Farm. The average initial score is 92.67%. Lead reader Gabriella will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Whitelock Community Farm, a fiscally sponsored project of Fusion Partners, is seeking funds through the New Artwork Planning Grant. They are in Baltimore City. The funds are to support the planning process for a community-engaged mural design on a shipping container, which is being used as an office space on Whitelock Street in Baltimore City. The mural would foster collaboration and input from residents to enhance the community beautification. The goals of this planning grant are to represent the values of the Reservoir Hill residents and symbolize the farm's missions. The purpose of transforming the shipping container, which is typically probably kind of uglier, into a mural that represents the community is their main goal. Of note, the farm plans to highlight the stories and contribution of the Black and Indigenous farmers who came before them on the land, to highlight conversations about food issues and injustice, and to inspire pride and connection in the community. They plan to engage the community in various ways, including a survey, a kickoff event, in-person listening sessions, design workshops, and voting once there's a group of artworks to be selected. In my review of this application, I did not have any major suggestions for improvement. I thought that their timeline and budget were well thought out and that they did a good job at describing their goals and community engagement.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Gabriella about the project. I thought the engagement plan was really thorough and detailed. I mean, only minor suggestion is, including like a sample of the questions that they would have included on the community survey. But, they have public kickoff events, listening events, storytelling circles, even a design workshop with the artists. So I thought this was really a community-centered project.
All right, panelists, any other thoughts, questions, or recommendations? All right, if not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional info.
No comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please enter your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your scores.
And the average final score is 93.67%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35489, submitted by the Junior Achievement of the Eastern Shore. The average initial score is 88.67%. Lead reader Hadassah will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
This is to support Junior Achievement of the Eastern Shore's planning process for a new public mural to be created by We Are Limitless Studios. The mural will be on the exterior of the Purdue Henson Junior Achievement Center, creating a vibrant and meaningful representation of Junior Achievement's mission, which is focused on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and career readiness. They will begin by gathering input through surveys of partners, students, sponsors, and staff, ensuring diverse perspectives to guide the mural's design. They also include sample questions within the application. I did recommend that they include a little bit more detail about the other community stakeholders and more specifics on the types of events and community events that they would engage the community participants in. I'm assuming, of course, that this is, of course, the school partners that they already work with, but to be a little bit more explicit there. Other than that, I thought the planning schedule and the budget were realistic.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
Something I noted was that I would suggest including more about the community outside of the Junior Achievement Group. They have a lot of a very good understanding of the group itself, but what about the community that will be impacted surrounding the area, and how maybe what their values are, and how this will help support them.
Yes, and to add to that point, maybe some statistics about the community outside the center. I'm also curious about the age ranges of the students who view the mural and who vote on the theme final design.
All right, panelists, are there any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
No comment.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's 1 minute. If you could wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 87%. Next. Please open application ID 2025-35797, submitted by the Chop Tank Telemato Legacy Project. The average initial score is 93.67%. Lead reader, Virginia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Hi. The application Chop Tank Telemato Legacy Project is seeking funding for a planning grant to implement a project in the Eastern Shore towns of Galenia and Marydale. The applicant proposes to do 2 new murals in these towns. In reading of the application, the highlights were the excellent outline depicting community involvement, engagement, and selection. The new artworks planning schedule matches to question 1 accurately and provides specific details on planning. The budget is excellent by calculating each estimated cost in terms of how many hours and at what hourly rate each staff member or members will be paid. Some of the questions I had for this applicant were, if there is a limit of participating artists/community members in the creation of the mural, and how to reach the rural community that does not use Facebook or social media. Based on the rubric, I would recommend the applicant to elaborate on the artist selection process in terms of how many artists are selected, perhaps go into more detail about any requirements for the community members/artists to participate in the mural creation.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Virginia's overall summary. I did want to mention that they did include that they're going to head to the libraries, churches, and school events, but more specificity, of course, would have been helpful here in terms of their kind of direct community outreach outside of social media. Like, is there particular partnerships that you already have in place with some of these institutions to make sure that the population is reached?
I agree with Virginia. I felt that the application had a strong description of the community and planning process. They mentioned that they'll develop bilingual flyers in order to distribute on social media. I did have questions or recommend that the applicant describe support of how translators or other methods to engage the bilingual residents will occur during those community engagement sessions.
I do agree with everyone that the description is really great on the goals of the project. They're very specific already for this being a planning grant on the type of artwork. My suggestion would be to have maybe a little bit more wiggle room on that and not be so specific. Their community engagement is well dispersed through the whole application. So maybe a little bit hard to find, but when you dig down to it, it is there. And they do seem to have a good idea as to how to reach each community.
All right, panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? All right, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
Yeah, just in response to some of the comments pulling from the application, the artist selection notes that the community members are the artists for these projects. This organization is included in the teaching artist roster and to kind of act as a community artist or lead teaching artist that engages the communities they work with in creating the work. So they don't really have an artist selection process. And then further down under community impact, it describes how they've conducted this work prior in other areas of the Eastern Shore. So it's building on an experience that is there around community engagement and meeting the community members where they're at.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 93.67%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35877, submitted by Story Tapestries. The average initial score is 93.33%. Lead reader Acacia will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The Story Tapestry application is seeking funding for a new artworks planning grant in order to implement planning for a new public artwork at a public museum space in Montgomery County, Maryland. The application proposes to activate the museum sites through the design of a mural that reflects the voice of the community, as well as a historical context that is provided by the local museums. The application highlights included it that they provided a detailed description of the community engagement workshops that will be conducted by the artists. And it also mentions that the museum director will work with schools, libraries, and churches in order to engage the community in the work. Based on the rubric, I would recommend the applicant further outline public engagement efforts as it relates to the proposed community compared to the previous communities that are served through past artist projects.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
One of the highlights of this project, I thought, was them providing interpreters for ASL, Spanish, and French to kind of ensure accessibility to their community workshops. Also thought they did detail how the artist was selected. They've done just such amount of significant outreach already.
It's clear in their description of the community engagement and the needs, like Hadassah just said, that they know their community. I would suggest including more of a statement in that first question about the community. I don't know if maybe statistics would help, but something that just described the community itself, that gave more context to why they need interpreters or why they're choosing to provide interpreters and things like that.
All right, panelists, are there any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? All right. If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
No comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please enter your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 93.67%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35885, submitted by Rebuild Metro. The average initial score is 89%. Lead reader Amber will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
All right, Rebuild Metro is seeking funds to implement 1, a community-driven artist selection process, and 2, a collaborative community-based artwork planning design process for a street art installation and traffic calming project in the 700 block of Johnson Square, where Rebuild Metro is working with the neighborhood leaders to redevelop 18 abandoned row homes into new high-quality homes. And looking at this, the description, the detailed description aligned with its goals in number 1, and its planning schedule aligns with the questions in number 1. And I didn't have any issues with the budget. I do like that it is a public art for the street. That's a different idea. Something that is interesting to me. I did have some questions on how exactly the community is able to vote for the artist. Is there how do they vote?
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Amber. I like the project because it is different, street art to kind of calm down traffic. But I do recommend more details in terms of like the artist selection process, and even the recruitment of the community panel.
I thought that their description of the goals was really well thought out and well articulated. In terms of the schedule, I would suggest breaking it out a little bit more, fleshing it out where they have plan, schedule, promote, and execute workshop. I feel like that could be broken out more to what is the time period you're going to plan and schedule it, and then how will you be promoting it, and then execute the workshop. I thought could be one event, and that would give a better outline to their process and maybe help be more organized.
I thought the applicant did a good job at explaining what the community engagement sessions would entail. I would recommend more detail on how the community panel will be selected, as well as within the planning schedule, if the community panel would meet outside of those 3 workshops that were listed.
All right, panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
That's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap your score.
And the average final score is 87%. Next, please open application ID 2025-36020, submitted by Washington College. The average initial score is 94.67%. Lead reader Gabriella will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Thank you. So Washington College of Kent County, specifically the Starr Center for the Study of the American Experience, is applying for a new artwork planning grant. They're seeking funds to support community engagement, inclusive planning, and outreach for phase 2 of its public art project titled Art plus Community plus History, Creating a Landmark Together, which will honor 4 centuries of Black history in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. This would be their second planning grant. They received a planning grant for phase 1 of their project in 2024. The artwork would be installed along the Chester River outside of the Starr Center's offices in their on their campus. The center has put together a committee already for planning of this artwork. The committee is made up of local and non-local stakeholders, nonprofit leaders, and experts. The committee events and meetings will be open to the public, which is one of the ways they're planning for community engagement. Community engagement is the main focus of the second phase of their project. Engagement listed includes programming for school-age students in visioning and design, creation of a vision statement and RFP, engaging public art advisors, production of videos, and more. In my review of the application, I did not have any major suggestions for improvement. I thought that it was a really thought out and descriptive plan.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion starting now.
I do agree with Gabriella that this is a really well thought out proposal. It's very detailed. I just had a very minor comment on being very explicit on the art medium, that it's obviously maybe a sculpture, mural, just being very explicit on the medium here. Other than that, I didn't really have any major comments or suggestion. I like that the project includes honoraria for the planning committee members, includes the travel stipends for the public art advisors as well. I thought the schedule was clear, specific, and realistic.
I will say, Hadassah, I thought that as well, maybe being more explicit, or if it is really open, then being explicit in saying that if they don't really have a something specific in mind and they're hoping that the artist will provide that, saying that in the application.
Panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No explicit information. I think just reinforcing that what the panelists brought up about the medium being rather open. I think that's intentional, but I think your comments recommending maybe being more explicit on that are valid.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Unless that's been 1 minute, if you could please wrap up your
And the average final score is 95%. All right, so now we're gonna be shifting gears and reviewing the new artworks project grant. So panelists, please note the shift in the rubric. The rubric is different for the project grants. And we will now proceed with those project grant application reviews. Please open application ID 2025-34837, submitted by Talbot County Public Schools. The average initial score is 87.6%. Lead reader Hadassah will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Project funds would support Talbot County Public Schools implementation of a new public artwork. It's a narrative art structure, a canopy by Patrick Rogan. The public art project's concept explores and celebrates their schools as a sanctuary, a safe place in society where children can grow and explore who they are without fear. There's very clear partnership and involvement from the community. I did noted that it's a clearly driven, community engaged process with Easton Elementary staff, students, and families. They also engage the Milton Alumni Association. They also have partnerships with Building African American Minds and Chesapeake Multicultural Research Center. They're also planning to do some oral history work, but I did recommend, just to make sure that this is a sustainable and accessible way for the people to engage with the oral history. So just a note about looking at the resources and standards from the Oral History Association. I thought that the artists had very clear prior experience to implement this project. The sample works that were attached were very helpful in visualizing the work that they would do. I have no other comments about the schedule or the budget necessarily. It does include the artist compensation, artwork, supplies, and installation. I did have a comment about the maintenance. I do recommend just, some training and some guidance for janitorial staff on proper cleaning and upkeep, just making sure that, if the artist is involved in repainting if needed, or if the school does that, just being clear on who is identified to do the maintenance.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
In following up on what Hadassah said, I completely agree that the maintenance could use, I would suggest more flesh out maintenance plan. I noted that this kind of assumes that the artwork will require minimal maintenance, but they just don't quite know yet, and that it will be done by school janitorial staff. I suggested that maybe taking a look at the weekly or daily maintenance needed for this artwork and on top of what the janitorial staff already has to do. I know sometimes janitorial staff can be spread out a little thin. So really thinking about the feasibility of the maintenance plan is a suggestion of mine. I thought that the budget was really detailed, as well as the schedule. I did suggest that maybe in the first section, including more about the production and installation process of the artwork would be helpful.
Yes, I also made a note about it regarding the first question about the installation process of the structures and how actually the memories or photos will be attached to the poles. I'm interested in that process and the specific materials and layout of the structures in this description. But overall, in question 1, I thought the concept and idea was very strong.
I agree with Virginia. I feel like the application provided a clear description of the school and the school community that will be impacted through this project. In terms of maintenance, I felt that it was nice that they included some of the maintenance costs within an existing landscape crew contract. So some maintenance fees are already being held for the project.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No further comment.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please enter your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 87.4%. All right, we're going to take a break here now. Because we're so ahead of schedule, we're actually going to take a 15-minute break, allow us a little bit more time here. The time is now 12:14. Let's just round that up. We'll come back at 12:30. So we'll see you back here at 12:30. Thank you. All right, folks, the time is now 12:30. If you can start to make your way back. Let's see, we have got Acacia, Hadassah, Virginia, Gabriella, and Amber. If you could just give us a quick hello so we know you're back. There you are. All right. We are all back here. Hope you had a great break and are ready to review the final remaining applications for review today. All right, please open application ID 2025-35230, submitted by the Jewish Community Center of Baltimore. The average initial score is 85.6%. Lead reader, Virginia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The application for the Jewish Community Center of Baltimore is seeking funding for a project grant to implement a project in the Rosenblum campus of the Jewish Community Center in Owings Mill, Baltimore County. The applicant proposes to do a new public artwork, a sculptural trailhead, and art along the nature trail. In my reading of the application, the highlights were the excellent description of the community engagement. I appreciate the artist's prior experience that aligns with the project. The new artwork's project schedule aligns with question 1 and 2 very accurately. Some questions I had for this applicant is questioning about the feasibility of the project in terms of the tree protectors in the long term. I questioned the growth of the tree, the construction of the tree protector, and how these protectors will be installed. I also questioned how the budget line of $22,000 for the fabricator was calculated. Based on the rubric, I would elaborate on the construction process of the tree protectors and explain in the notes how the $22,000 cost of the fabricator was calculated. For instance, how many estimated hours at what hourly rate might dictate this cost? Thank you.
All right, thank you, panelists. We now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
Some highlights of the application that I noticed is that the proposed project budget includes majority of the expenses required for about two of the 3 art initiatives. I would recommend that the application further explain the maintenance portion, who will be responsible for funding maintenance, or at least fundraising efforts that support the maintenance of the project.
I agree with Virginia and Acacia, what has been said. I did have a note here about just recommending a maintenance guide for and indicating who is responsible. Since even weather resistant work, it still needs some cleaning. It's not dirt resistant, it's weather resistant. And so just making sure that there's guides to make sure that this is sustainable work.
I thought the same in terms of the maintenance plan with things like trees and plants. You're going to have pruning, fertilizing, and other kind of maintenance. They could have, I would suggest going into maybe some more detail there. Something that I noted, and I am looking again, I'm not seeing in the budget a price point for the trees themselves. I would think about maybe budgeting that in, as well as including the installation of the trees themselves, if my understanding is correct, in the schedule. Okay, I'm going to correct myself before Ryan can. There is a place where it does say that they're going to prepare the ground and spread the wood chips and plant the trees. So it's just kind of that all of that is wrapped up into one event. I would suggest maybe breaking it out if it can be. Okay.
Thank you, panelists. That's been 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
I do not. I was looking for some comments about, or for some details about the question about the tree expense, but I do not see that listed in the budget either. So I don't really have much to add to that. Thank you.
I will add that the public art expenses cannot include things that are not related to the actual making of the work. So that might be why they did not include purchasing of trees in the budget.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your score.
And the average final score is 85.2%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35293 submitted by Brewers Hill Neighbors. The average initial score is 89.6%. Lead reader, Acacia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The Brewers Hill Neighbors, Inc. is seeking funding for a new artwork project grant to implement 2 new mural artworks located under an underpass in Baltimore City. The site was chosen because it is a gateway from the I-95 corridor and the graffiti and trash that is also dumped within this area. The application proposes to create two new murals in order to instill culture and community pride, deter graffiti, and engage community residents in preparing and painting sections of the mural. In my reading of the application, some highlights that I noted that it includes an excellent overview of the community engagement activities that are conducted during the planning process and details future opportunities for community involvement, such as cleaning and greening events, mural painting by the community members, and a dedication ceremony. The application has identified contingency plans or contingency funds to pay for the necessary maintenance and has secured cameras in order to deter vandalism. The community description outlines both the new and upcoming citywide initiatives aimed at increasing the use of that proposed corridor. I would recommend that the application include more detail on the current usage of the space, as well as its proximity to local homes and businesses.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I was going to recommend just a little bit more detail on like providing us a fuller picture of the community, its history, demographics, any notable residents, just something like that. I also recommended that, they include like what type of experience would inform the selection decision for the artist selection committee. More about like how many residents were like engaged in these processes before. I do see that, one of the good things about this application is you can clearly see that Mural Masters is clearly well experienced. I thought it was great to see a letter from Baltimore City Department of Transportation, their council member. So there's engagement on those levels, obviously, but I just wanted a little bit more from community members themselves. The maintenance plan overall was good, but, just recommending just a regular cleaning schedule, of course.
I thought this application was pretty well-rounded with a good description in all sections. There are things like the doctor mentioned that could make it exceptional, like further defining the community.
All right, panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
No comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your
And the average final score is 89.6%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35298, submitted by the Director for the Arts. The average initial score is 96.8%. Lead reader Amber will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
The fund will support Dorchester Center of the Arts implementation of a new public artwork, a Latin-themed mural entitled Shine Your Light by artist Miriam Morin, to be located at 118 Cedar Street in Cambridge, Dorchester. The Shine Your Light Latin Heritage Project endeavors a unite array of Latin backgrounds and traditions, illuminating their stories through the medium of public art. Dorchester County, Maryland, and particularly city of Cambridge, has a growing Latino population currently underrepresented in public art. This mural aims to fill this void and address inclusiveness in Dorchester County. The site of the mural will be a 17 by 30 wall of a multi-unit commercial building on a prominent Cambridge, Maryland, which also features a Latin food market. I thought this application was very well written and descriptive. I think it could have some more information in regards to the community overall for the Center of Cambridge. I know we have the community information for the Latinos since 2020, but I thought just overall, everyone that would be able to see it and enjoy it should be included. The artist does have the experience needed. That was well noted, and I didn't have any issues with the balance or the maintenance, besides maybe recommendation for contract maintenance services.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I thought the inclusion of the QR code and tech aspect really enhanced this application and artwork, and further engaged the community once the artwork was finished past its lifetime.
I agree with Amber and Gabriella. I did appreciate in the maintenance that they were including monthly inspections and also just training in proper mural care and maintenance techniques. They did include budgeting for maintenance as well. Overall, this was a really great and community engaged application.
One highlight that I found for the prior experience is that I felt that the application showed that both the applicant as well as the artist had previous experience implementing similar murals or similar artwork.
going off of that, maybe something that would enhance even more their maintenance aspect would be how they are maintaining the other murals that they have installed previously, like the Take My Hand mural that's been up for a while.
Thank you, panelists. That's been through.
All right, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your score.
The average final score is 96.8%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35645, submitted by Dickeyville Association. The average initial score is 96.8%. Lead reader Gabriella will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Thank you. The Dickeyville Community Association is seeking funds through the New Artworks project. They're located in Baltimore City, and the funds will support the implementation of a traffic calming pavement art mural by local artist Graham Coriel Allen, located near a park entrance at the intersection of Forest Park Avenue and Pickwick Road in Baltimore City. The concept for the artwork is to create an eye-catching piece to slow traffic and to provide an inviting entryway into the historic area and park. The artist describes his work as placemaking which seems like the association is really looking for and what drew them to the artist. They describe the materials needed for the artwork as the appropriate paint, primer, and sealant that the artist typically uses. They also note that the pedestrian crossing signs, which will be included for safety, they talk a lot about their work, that how they are collaborating and working with the Department of Transportation, the pedestrian crossing signs being one aspect of that. Being a neighborhood association, the application is clear and it describes the makeup and the values of the neighborhood extensively. Community engagement proposed looks like meetings to brainstorm themes and ideas, an online form to submit ideas, voting, and a community paint day, as well as a ribbon cutting event after the artwork has been installed. The artist has experience in this exact type of work and is a stakeholder as a local themselves. The association will be tasked with maintaining the artwork with advice from the artist. In my review of the application, I did not have any major suggestions for improvement.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I have nothing really additional to add to Gabriella's concise summary. I thought they're very well positioned to carry out this traffic calming project. They've done a lot of community engagement work. There's a very clear and specific maintenance plan and commitment for them to maintaining this afterwards.
I'll add that I really appreciated the community and engagement in the project. The incorporation of the community and taking part in the actual painting of the mural is a demonstration of the direct involvement, and I see that as a plus in the application.
The only additional question that I had, the application explained that the association would be responsible for the artwork oversight, but I wasn't sure if that association would also be responsible for funding the maintenance in case the street mural fades or needs additional upkeep.
So they noted that they are committed to maintaining the pavement art during the duration, and they have the maintenance plan afterwards. So the regular sweeping, light pressure washing, etc. They're also, they make a good faith effort to work with Baltimore City and its contractors to minimize any damage.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, panelists. That's been 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No additional comments.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your.
And the average final score is 97.2%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35693, submitted by the Baltimore Arts Realty Corp. The average initial score is 87.2%. Lead reader Hadassah will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Project funds would support Baltimore Arts Realty Corp to install a new mural by artist Nether in the Abo, correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, neighborhood in Baltimore City. They include a letter from the Salvation Army where the mural will be placed. I did have some recommendations, just more information about the neighborhood and its history. They did include some community engagement work that they were doing through their planning grant. I recommended that they do like a community reveal for the mural. Currently, as written, they were really reliant on the commissary entrepreneurs and the Salvation Army to engage the community members, and just wanted to know what they were doing to engage them themselves, especially since they already had a planning grant. The artist is clearly experienced, and the application does include some sample work. It's good to see that the artist is also OSHA certified. There's compensation for the artist, art assistance, equipment rental, and supplies. I thought the schedule was very reasonable. As far as the maintenance, I thought the artist should include or create a maintenance guide for the staff to clean the mural. And I'll leave it there for folks to kind of chime in on the kind of community engagement portion, and also whether they describe the community sufficiently enough.
But also that was something I noted as well, that I felt they could describe the community a little bit more and get a better understanding of the community, as well as how they will be engaging it specifically. I also noted for suggestion that they include, if they have done projects at this scale before, if they've handled that in terms of the organization's experience in addition to the artist's experience, which was well stated.
Yes, and I would just like to add to both of those 2 points and reinforce the idea of the concept of the mural relating back to the community. I feel like that could be a little more expanded in this answer and described a little more thoroughly. I would recommend that.
All right, panelists, are there any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? All right. If not, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No additional comment.
All right. Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you can please wrap.
And the average final score is 85.6%. Next, please open application ID 2025-35959 submitted by the Garrett County Arts Council. The average initial score is 87.4%. Lead reader, Virginia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Thank you. The application from Garrett County Arts Council is seeking funding for a project grant to implement a project in National Road known as Route 40 in the Grantsville Arts and Entertainment District. The applicant proposes to do a public art milestone marker project. In my reading of the application, my highlights were accurate description describing the history of the project answered in question 1, answers well how the community and stakeholders are involved in the project, answers who will be oversighting and the maintenance of the project. Some of the questions I have for this applicant is if the final design is polished steel or painted design. I'm curious about the artist/fabricator's previous experience, and I question the cost of the fabrication of the monuments and how they were calculated. Based on the rubric, I would recommend for the applicant to clarify in question 1 if the monuments will be polished steel or painted, and calculate the cost of the fabrication of the monuments in terms of materials, labor, and how many hours and at what hourly rate it took for each monument to be fabricated. And perhaps elaborate on the artist fabricator's previous experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I agree with Virginia about them needing to, like, us recommending that they put more about the artist experience in this work, and just being a little bit more detailed in that regard.
I agree with Virginia and Hadassah. One additional highlight that I noted was that the applicant has previously completed a maintenance plan to include upkeep, and that the town of Grantsford has adopted the maintenance plan to ensure that this artwork is stable for a long time.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I suggested that adding the experience of the chosen fabricators or welders would be really beneficial to the application. Although I read and wrote that it seems like the artwork would be from the community. So there's the welders and fabricators, and then the artwork is from the community. And I noted that if that's true, is maybe suggesting including a budget line for compensating or giving a stipend to the artists. I thought that they had good experience in terms of what the projects that they have done before. And I noted that there seems to have been a movement in the folk community for paying for things like oral histories, artwork, paying people for their stories, right, rather than accepting them without payment.
Thank you, panelists. That's been 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
Well, just to add, just to reinforce, I think it was brought up and clear from the application that this is a continuation of a project that received a planning grant and a prior project grant. This is like a continued phase, and that in this area, that artists, the budget does note that there's honorarium for 12 artists. That's an $18,000 budget line, $1,500 per artist.
All right, thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your score.
And the average final score is 88%. Next, please open application ID 2025-36010, submitted by Arch Social Club. The average initial score is 84.4%. Lead reader, Acacia, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
Okay, the Art Social Community Network, Inc. is seeking a new artworks project grant to implement a mural that is located at a social club in Baltimore City's Penn North community, which is a part of the Black Arts District. The proposed project aims to work with the original artist to recreate the original 2015 mural and to extend the mural to cover the entire wall to incorporate imagery of influential Black community figures as well as symbols. The project clearly outlines the community that will be impacted by the proposed artwork, including engagement with the Arch Social Club, community members at the nearby metro station, and artist open hours during the implementation phase. There's a strong description of previous and future plans to maintain the artwork. I would recommend the application add additional details about the previous community engagement activities that occurred in 2015 or during the planning process, as well as how the stories that are collected at the metro station will be used during the implementation process. Majority of the project budget expenses and income align to the project description. I would also recommend further description of if the wall repair has been conducted or how the repair will be included within the planning schedule.
Thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I also noted a suggestion to be more detailed about the repair of the wall as well.
Had a recommendation based on the community engagement portion. They said they're going to be capturing community members' stories. I was just recommending that they work with the local library to actually make sure these stories are well preserved. A lot of times folks will say they create a digital archive. Just because it's online doesn't mean it can't disappear as well. And so just working with a partner who does have that more experience might strengthen that section and also just contribute to the longevity of the stories of this community.
I did have a note under the budget to add more detail to the materials, gallons, what kind of paint, etc., and prices for that.
Amber, I noted the same thing. I would suggest that they break out what they're saying is the artist fees, and the note says inclusive of materials and installation. I would maybe suggest breaking out the materials from the actual artist fees or installation fees or work fees.
All right, panelists, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
No further comment.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired with 1 minute starting now.
Panelists, that's been 1 minute. If you could please wrap up your score.
And the average final score is 83.6%. Next. Please open application ID 2025-36081, submitted by the Portia LaVon Stokes Williams Foundation. The average initial score is 85.4%. Lead reader, Amber, will now introduce the grant in connection to the rubric with 2 minutes beginning now.
All right, the funds asked for here will support Portia LaVon Stokes Williams Foundation implementation of a new public artwork, a sculpture by China May, located at the Thomas Jefferson Elementary School in Baltimore City. The Portia LaVon Stokes Williams Foundation works to provide the assistance to essential students, overall student academic excellence. The foundation is committed to continuing Portia's legacy of teaching, promoting, and encouraging academic excellence. They had a very good description of the concept and the meaning in the question there, and the budget and maintenance was spelled out. The artist has done multiple little free libraries is what the new public art installation is going to be, a little free library with community images around the library itself. And the community was involved in that process.
All right, thank you. Panelists, we now have 3 minutes for any additional discussion, starting now.
I think the importance of this project to the community is extremely well stated, and it's aligned with the applicant's mission, really. And I thought it was really nice to specifically have the opening of the work on the Remembrance Day. Something that I did have questions about, maybe a suggestion or to include this information in the application, is where the books for the library will be coming from. How will that process, how will it be maintained, the books inside of there? Where will they come from? What's the budget like for those? I thought that maybe could be included in the maintenance portion of this application. And maybe I missed it. I can help you.
I'll just add that this is such a modest request. The artist is clearly well experienced. I thought the samples were excellent. I was kind of thinking maybe they should have included the budget line to support that community engagement event. But there's clearly a lot of community support, even organizations as well, like Arts for Learning, Baltimore Fire Department, Baltimore Police Department, Baltimore City itself. So I wondered if they probably should have asked for more to support those type of community engagement activities. And as far as like the note on maintenance, the sculpture is going to be treated with anti-graffiti coating to reduce damage. It's going to be monitored using solar-powered cameras to deter vandalism. But the artist, I think, only provides like 1 year maintenance support. And so, after the 1 year, I wanted a little bit more detail who do the regular maintenance and cleaning. And as Gabriella noted, who's going to change, add the books when they're all gone, because that happens a lot with free little libraries. Just a little bit more detail on how this would be sustained for the community.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, or recommendations? All right, Ryan and Nora, do you have any additional information to share?
No comment.
Okay.
Thank you. Based on the information gathered from the discussion, please edit your final scores and comments in Smart Simple if desired, with 1 minute starting now.
Unless that's been 1 minute, if you can please wrap up your scoring.
And the average final score is 86.8%. And that was the last application for review. Thank you, panelists, so much for your time and thoughtfulness today. Your recommendations and discussions are incredibly valuable to the review process and to applicants. Thank you so much. Now I'll turn it over to Chad for final remarks.
Thanks, Kathy. Definitely echoing that gratitude for the panelists. You are playing a vital role in our grant making process. We rely very heavily on the public for their arts expertise to help us complete that work. So how wonderful that you chose to invest your time and energy in this. Really appreciate you. And as always, absolutely have to recognize the staff. There's an extraordinary amount of work that goes into making what happened today run smoothly. So to our program team, Ryan and Nora, and our grants team, Kathy and Kirk, thank you so much. Round of virtual applause for your efforts, and acknowledging also our newer team members, Abby and Ellie, who are getting more familiar with the MSAC grant making process today. Wonderful to spend time with you all this winter Friday. This ends the public portion of our meeting. Observers, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions about today's process. And panelists, if you could please hang on, as we're going to briefly cover some next steps.
Thank you so much, folks. Just wanted to reiterate the gratitude to you all as we're wrapping up here, and the public members are leaving our meeting. We, we plan to go until about 2 o'clock today, but we understand it's been a long day. We're going to offer a little follow-up time in a closed session that's not open to the public, just for you all to give us any feedback on your experience, any questions, go over anything that was on your mind today, or say the things out loud you weren't able to. So Nora is going to be sending you an invite to that closed session. We can take a 5-minute break and maybe come back at 1:41 to just stretch your legs, and then just a few minutes to catch up. It's optional. If you need to go, that's okay too. If you do need to go, I'll just say right now that we are going to be processing your stipends as soon as possible after this meeting, and we will, if you have any questions about that, or we'll reach out to you. If we need anything from you, we'll also reach out to you. Yes. Okay, see you in 5 minutes if you're able. Thanks.